Welcome back. It is a pleasure to welcome back Christopher Skeete. Now, you may remember back in the day, not that long ago actually, when Christopher Skeete was the CAQ's minister responsible for the English-speaking community, or at least relations with the English-speaking community. And then that went to Eric Girard, who is our finance minister. He remains the finance minister, but he's given up that job, and it's gone back to Christopher Skeete, who is on the line. Chris, welcome back. Nice to have you.
How are you, Aaron?
I'm doing pretty good. I sent you a text after the cabinet shuffle, because I noted that you now have, I believe, after Jean-François Robert's, the longest portfolio with more things in your portfolio than any other minister. So I don't know if that, do you say congratulations for that?
Well, it's a lot of work, but I think to have the Premier show that much faith in me is quite an honor.
So let me read, for people who don't know, Christopher Skeete, now Minister of International Relations and the Francophonie, Minister responsible for relations with English-speaking Quebecers, Minister responsible for the fight against racism, and Minister responsible for the Laval region. Wow.
Well, thank you. I'm also MNA for Sainte-Rose.
Yeah, that too.
I also have to take care of my people. Otherwise, none of that matters.
Yeah. Listen, I'm kidding, but obviously the shuffle this week, it's been a tough time for your government, obviously, and for the Premier as well. When I was talking to listeners at the beginning of the show, Chris, I said, today's open line, what's on your mind? And one caller actually brought up the fact that, Eric Girard, in his time as the minister responsible for relations with Anglophone Quebecers, really didn't do very much at all. So maybe it's a fair question to ask, how are things going to change now that you have this role?
Well, it's something that was always really important for me. I had this file for 4 years. It was a challenge. But a good challenge, and to be able to represent the English community inside our government is something that I'm looking forward to. I can't wait to meet our new deputy minister, and we're going to have a briefing very soon, and I'll get reacquainted with the files. But, one of the good things about having the finance minister responsible for the file is the increase in budget. The budget expanded 7 times in the 7 years that we've been in power. And so, I think Eric did a good job in terms of, showing how important the English community was by putting the money where the mouth was.
Well, listen, I know when you were doing this job originally, the Quebec Community Groups Network was around. I don't know if you saw Eva Ludwig's column the other day, now that, it's called TALQ or Talk. And she actually said Wednesday's provincial cabinet shuffle was cause for disappointment. So what do we say to that?
Well, I haven't spoken to Eva in a very long time. I look forward to speaking to her again.
Okay.
Sure. I don't know why she's disappointed, so I guess I'll have to speak to her.
Well, if I didn't know better, I'd say by virtue of the fact that I guess her commitment, or at least what she does within Talk now, is to deal with the minister responsible for English relations, is not much happened with Eric Girard. So you'd think with you being appointed back to this job, there'd be reason for optimism, not disappointment. So I'm not entirely sure what that's about.
Well, look, one of the things that I learned in my previous time is that the English community is very diverse. There's a lot of voices around the table. I'm going to be building bridges with all these voices at the table, including Talk, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move the needle on a lot of issues that are of concern for the community.
So let's talk about a couple of things that have happened, just in the last little while. First, we went through the Go Habs Go debate. I don't want to get to that anymore, but what happened with the Burgundy Lion, right? And the fact, and it's interesting because I had a caller who said, it takes people to embarrass or to shame this government when it comes to language to get any kind of action or reaction. So in the case of the Burgundy Lion, there was pushback immediately, and then the OQLF changed its position. How do you fix that, Christopher? Because this has happened before, and it's likely to happen again.
I promise it'll happen again. Okay, this is what happens when you legislate language. Legislation is a broadsword, not a scalpel. It can't take into consideration every single reality that's on the ground. The good news is, as with the Go Habs Go, as with the Burgundy Lion, when we came face-to-face with the question, we were able to let common sense prevail. In Quebec, we've made the choice to protect the French language through legislation, and sometimes these things will happen. But I would find comfort in the fact that we were able to see reason and let common sense prevail.
Well, okay, but my argument to that would be common sense didn't prevail. It took backlash for someone to sit up and go, oh, you know what? This doesn't look good for us, so we better fix it. That's not common sense.
Aaron, we've been going through this for 20 years. There's always an incident every few months. We had the Pasta Gate before that. Regardless of the government that's in power, we have these issues where we come face to face with what's written in the law, a misinterpretation, and ultimately someone has to sit down and look at it individually. The good news is we made the right decision in this case, and we let common sense prevail. But this is what happens, as I said. Legislation is a broadsword, not a scalpel. It can't get everything right all the time. But the good news is we have elected people in power with common sense who can make the right decisions when these things don't work out.
Did you say we have elected officials in power with common sense? Is that what you just said?
I did say that,
okay.
And I said it without laughing, Aaron.
All right, listen, I get it. You know, you're fully in, but my reaction, Chris, to that would simply be, as much as this got done, and you want to take credit for the government saying, "Look, we fixed it," right? How about all the cases that we don't hear about, where people are fined, but they don't choose to go public? We don't hear about them, and they don't get fixed.
Well, actually, the good news is when they go public, it's because somewhere in the system it didn't really work out. Usually, these common sense issues get resolved before they're public. So there are opportunities for people to make complaints. There are people in the OQLF who have tremendous judgment. I know that sometimes in the English community it doesn't always feel that way because we see these anecdotal instances where sometimes it becomes public. But honestly, they do good work generally, and they accompany businesses to follow the law. But of course, I know that the OQLF hits the imagination in the English community, and I know instances like the Burgundy Lion hit the imagination. And of course, the good news is I find comfort in the fact that we were able to let common sense prevail, and that this has happened throughout every government ever since we've had language laws in Quebec. So that's why I'm very confident in saying that this is going to probably happen again. And the good news is, if it does, common sense will once again prevail, because nobody wants to stifle business, let alone me. I'm a pro-business politician, and I want things to go forward, and I believe in our entrepreneurs, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Chris, you saw the story, I'm guessing you saw the story, Andy Riga's piece in the Gazette, the 4-part series about English or French in Montreal. Did you catch much of that, or did you see it?
I saw it, but I only read a couple bits here and there. I've been kind of busy this week, as you might expect.
Yeah, no, I get that. So you know the situation that we go back to last year, I guess, when someone booked a library spot and it was going to be for an English group, and then the city didn't know what to do. People at the library panicked. Oh, you can't unless there's someone in French involved. You're aware of that story. Are we going to have that happen again, or has that been kind of now worked out because the city... when we had all this information or the access to information stuff, it seems there's a mindset, and I'll read you just the quote. It says, although the use of another language is possible in certain specific situations, the predominance of French must always be preferred as the preferred option, even when communication can legally be bilingual. Are we going to come up against this over and over again?
So the English community has a right to exist in Quebec, okay? Let's just be very clear. The English community has a right to exist. What we did with Bill 96, Aaron, is we created a framework where the exemplarity of the state is put forward, which means the state, in this case the Quebec government and the city in question, have an obligation to promote and to make sure that French is the language of choice when interacting with public. But that doesn't mean that if you want to use the library, you can't speak French in the library. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the Secretariat for English
you mean speak English in the library, not speak French?
Speak English in the library. Obviously, that means you can go to in a library and speak English in a group and whatnot. So, of course, when you interact with the state, the objective is that you do so in French. And of course, when you're a consumer of the product of the state's goods, you're allowed to speak English. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But I understand that sometimes in the interpretation of these types of laws, some people don't fully understand what that means. And don't forget, Bill 96 and its application is still kind of new. We're going to get to some social equilibrium in time. And sometimes we're going to see these things pop up. But one of the good things is our government has continued to support the English Secretariat. I will be there to make sure that these types of things are resolved quickly. And, the English community should know that they always have a voice when they call my office.
I will point out one thing. You said, obviously, you can speak English. The problem, of course, with that is it's not obvious, certainly not to the people there who have to try to figure out if they're allowed to let you do this or not. And that includes the city of Montreal, by the way, who have a guideline of what they have to say to you first before they'll actually allow you to speak English to them. Do you not see that as an obstacle?
I see that as people trying to apply the law, which says that they have to be exemplary in their approach to language. And again, as I said before, Aaron, this is what happens when you try to legislate language. You have a policy, and sometimes policies are not perfect. That's why I exist. That's why we have the ability to contest these types of things. And this is why ultimately I think we'll reach an equilibrium. This is still new, and while we iron things out, I think it's going to take some time. And irritants like this, and they are irritants to the English community, I think it makes them feel apart, and I think that's a problem. Until we get to that equilibrium, I think some of these things might come up once in a while. But of course, people can always feel free to reach out, and we'll always take a look at it to make sure that it's being applied correctly.
I would just point out the ironing has been going on for 7 years. So,
well, I would argue it's been going on since 1977. Since the advent of Bill 101,
fair enough.
We've been trying to get this right, and I think it's always going to be a work in progress. And so every government has had to go through this. We're trying to do this, trying to get through it in our own way. The good news is, as I said, I think there's optimism. In 2017, the budget for the English Secretariat was about $2 million. It's now almost 20. I think that's good news.
I will leave it at this, except to ask you, as far as you're concerned, someone said, ask him what his mandate is. I think it's pretty clear. Your mandate is to have relations with the English community, to listen to the English community. Beyond that, what do you see it as?
My priority for the English community has always been and will always be community vitality. To make sure that even though English is a minority language in Quebec and the majority language on the continent, that English-speaking Quebecers have equal outcomes in Quebec. We still see instances where, especially in the regions, English-speaking Quebecers have less access to employment, and that for me is an issue. I want Quebecers to have a full citizen experience in Quebec, and I want them to have abilities to live their lives and be successful in Quebec. Sometimes that means learning another language. Sometimes it means learning different skills. But for me, community vitality is where it's at.
Krista, always appreciate the time. I thank you so much, and I know we'll get a chance to speak again.
I'm sure we will.
Take good care. Christopher Skeete, he is, again, Quebec's Minister for Relations with English Quebecers. There you go.